Great, thank you so much for joining us. What a great start to the day. I jotted down, I guess we would call this an instant tweet. I guess before there was Twitter, we just called this a quote. The one that I wrote down from that first session is, I want to be a CEO that serves 7 billion people. I like that. Now, from the earliest days of shared value, we know that the concept has generated a global dialogue. A global dialogue, something you'll see in this room over the next few days as you meet people, we draw people from around the world. And early on, when we started thinking about the initiative, we realized that as our own organization, we needed to think about how to seed and advance that global dialogue that moved somewhere past just logging frequent flyer mileage. And we wanted to find out ways that we could empower the people working around the world to advance shared value in the different political and economic systems in which they work around the world. It's not all the same. And we started supporting this global dialogue about 3 years ago, generating a global community of practice by launching our affiliate network. This network is made up of firms from around the world. We have, at this point, about 30 firms that operate in 50 different countries. These firms work across different types of professional services and work in every corner of the globe, from Korea to Colombia to all parts of Latin America and Australia. As I mentioned, we think about these, I mentioned this morning, I wanted to talk over the next couple of days, the sources of inspiration in this community, and our affiliates are one source of inspiration. And more than just inspiration, these affiliates are creating new knowledge and practice that is advancing shared value around the world. Even in this event over the next couple of days, I want to point out that these organizations, four of these organizations, so Matter Unlimited, Innate Motion, Cohesion Strategies, and the Terrace, have been working in partnership with FSG and the Shared Value Initiative to develop new thinking on how to link the creation of shared value to the creation of brand value. How do you connect how shared value leads to enhanced and increased brand value? A relevant question for many of the companies in the room. And in addition, in the lab sessions, you'll see affiliates like Pixar Global, Compartamos con Colombia, and Alula, who will also be contributing to these sessions. Now, in this session here, we get to focus at a slightly different level, and I'm pleased to welcome the four gentlemen to my right. We've also had two organizations emerge in the last year. In fact, we had conversations with Peter Yates at this event last year to talk about building organizations that could advance regional and country level shared value dialogue and thinking to advance knowledge and practice in the places in the world that they work. And we have a moment here to focus on these conversations. So let me introduce our newest regional affiliates. We have Mr. Peter Yates from the Shared Value Project in Australia, the chairman. Mr. Robert Johansson, who is with the Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, a community bank in Australia. We have Mr. Amit Kapoor, who has founded the Shared Value Initiative India, which is actually being formally launched and announced here at this event, as well as Mr. Wilfred Alber, who's joining him to talk about the progress that we see in shared value in the context of India. So without further ado, Peter, let me hand it over to you to have a dialogue with Robert.
Well, good morning, everybody. I was asked to first of all share a little bit about the Shared Value Project in Australia, and then take the opportunity to interview Robert Johansson, who is, as Justin said, is the chairman of the Bendigo Bank, one of Australia's leading banks, and a bank that's got an extraordinarily long-term interest in the shared value concept. So how did the Shared Value Project emerge and what it is? We are effectively the regional partner of the Shared Value Initiative. We're a member-based organisation. We have the benefit of membership of a number of large Australian corporations, also consulting firms and not-for-profits. Those fees fund a small secretariat, and that small secretariat effectively is the distributing agent for the concept of shared value in Australia. How it actually emerged, and I think it's important to note that to get an idea out, you have to have both a channel pull and a channel push strategy to really drive an idea. And the affiliate network was actually really pushing the idea hard into corporations. But to get channel pull, obviously lots of Australian corporations can't spend the time or the money or the jet lag hours to come here to New York to hear the story. And so what we've effectively done is by creating an overarching network in Australia, we've created the channel, the channel push that we're able to drive in Australia. So we have a dialogue with the analysts and explain shared value analysts. So when the analysts interview the CEOs of Australian corporations, they've already got an idea about what shared value is, and so that's who we are. And we've been around for about a year. Helen Steele is our Executive Director, Rod Ellis-Jones is our Deputy Director, and we're really delighted about the progress that we've been able to make, and we're really very passionate collectively about the concept of shared value. So that's the background to the Shared Value Project in Australia, and now I'm going to have an interview with Robert Johansen as one of the great captains of industry and drivers of shared value. I also have a particular privilege because when I was a young 25-year-old coming back from Japan to Australia to get a job, and the only thing I could do was to do Lotus 1, 2, 3 on a WAN computer, I applied for a job, and Robert actually interviewed me, gave me the job in 1985, so this is quite a fun moment for both of us. Robert, Bendigo Bank, you're a leader in the community as a banking and financial services organisation. Your community bank concept, which is such a wonderful example of shared value. Tell us about it, how did it emerge, what were the challenges?
Thanks, Peter. So in about now nearly 20 years ago, we just became a bank, and we were but we've been a building society since the 1850s. The organisation was founded on the goldfields of Bendigo when groups of miners, after a few years of living in tents, got sick of it and pooled their resources to build houses for each other. So effectively they pooled their resources, they took it in turns to get a house. So that was the first building society. And once they all got a house, it folded. Then someone thought this was a good idea, so the organisation was set up on a permanent basis. So the insight that the entity emerged out of a community need from people who were, in a sense, cut out or disenfranchised from what was then the banking system. That was where this thing, what's now Bendigo Bank, came from. 20 years ago, we were a bank. It was a crowded field, lots of new entrants in banking in Australia. We were a very small player. But as banking consolidated, a lot of branches in country towns were closing, were being shut down, sensible rationalisation. But those towns were suffering because without a bank, without the plumbing of finance in a community, communities can wither. So in one particular, in fact, two towns in country Victoria, towns that were on any basis probably too small to sustain branch banking, what we did was enter into a partnership with those communities. So the communities got their money together and bought a franchise. They own the branch, they employ the staff, they decide what hours it's open, and they take an interest in what banking gets done in it. We provide all the back office, the training, the IT, the capital, the risk management, and we share the revenue. Now that town, that first town, currently that community bank, and that branch cost them about $500,000 to get up and get going. That branch now contributes each year about $200,000, which that group puts back into the community. So over that 15 years, millions of dollars has been poured back into that town and built social infrastructure. It's contributed to childcare facilities. It's contributed to a lot of social infrastructure. And it's of no surprise to you that about 95% of the people in that town bank with the community bank. If we just turned up and opened a branch, we would not have had anything like that penetration. We wouldn't have had a business as robust and strong as that business is now for us. So this is very good business for us. It's business we would otherwise not have got. And the town is prospering too, because the value of the banking that they would do anyway, but which would be unrecognised and dispersed, they've collected and concentrated. We now have nearly 350 similar towns and local communities that own their local branch distribution business. It's business we otherwise would not have got. And it's a kind of business that in 2008, when the world of banking was blowing up, when from most small, apparently vulnerable-looking organisations, deposit-taking organisations, money was fleeing, we didn't suffer that. In fact, we were a beneficiary at the time when funds were leaving what were perceived to be other weaker, small organisations. Why? Because people trusted us. They trusted us because they'd seen, through this example and now many other examples, how we worked together, how they could rely on us, and the value that they could get out of it. So it's been terrific business for us. We now find ourselves the 5th biggest retail bank in Australia. All the others who were in the queue ahead of us have gone for one reason or other. And I've no doubt one most important reason is we have high levels of customer advocacy, we have very high levels of staff engagement, and we have very high levels of trust. And so in a world of banking where those attributes are generally not found pretty commonly, and people now, as a result of the experience, are very critical and contemptuous of banks. And yet we find ourselves in that privileged position.
Robert, the analyst community. Right now, Bendigo Bank is extremely successful, great days again for everybody. Wouldn't it be cheaper for you just to go and buy out your community banks at a low PR and just trade it up onto the stock exchange? Isn't that what the analysts want you to do?
Well, they may, and some do. But if we did that, we know that we would be sabotaging, in a sense, the very basis for what it is that's made us distinctive. We would be sabotaging the strategy. It is the difference. Now, it's not a strategy that can't be replicated. But this is not an overnight strategy. But it could be destroyed overnight. It is, like all good strategies, fragile. And particularly because good long-term strategies do rely on things like trust, it is fragile. And sure, but if someone invests in our bank, and they do it on the basis that we will give it up because we'll try and make quick sales regardless of their impact, then they should be. It's like we say with our customers, if we get a customer just because of price, we know we'll lose them because of price. We know we have to be competitive. We won't write home loans more expensive than other people write home loans. Our customers aren't mums, they'll go to where they're competitive. But if we can offer the same price, then we've got a good chance they'll choose us because they see the value that we create for them in their communities. We have this saying, successful customers make successful communities, and successful communities create successful banks. but it's in that order.
And finally, Robert, the shared value concept, how is it evolving in Australia? What stage is it at, do you think?
Well, I think the pressure on all commercial and other participants to actually be seen to be doing something for the community rather than simply for a sectional interest. So feeding off prosperity rather than feeding into and creating prosperity. That pressure is persistent. But in other ways, the consequences of those pressures, where that leads to bad behaviours or short-term behaviours, people now have the weaponry to actually hold you to account. I mean, Twitter is a marvelous discipline on bad behaviour, I think. So I think the pressure on companies and others is huge and growing. And I think the awareness that you can't just manage a business for the very short term, you do need to continue to nurture prosperity. That's our job. Then I think that's becoming more apparent. But do I think that the strategy we're talking about will become so common quickly that in fact it won't be a strategy anymore because everyone will do it? I think it'll last a while longer.
I think it sounds like Helen Steele's got a job as the Executive Director of the Shared Value Project for a while now. Well, thank you very much indeed, Robert. I think we're going to hand over to...
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Robert. I love this notion of aligning the business's success with community success. Right? The community success